Imagine a world where Wilhelm II, the German Kaiser, wasn't just ruling over Germany, but also sitting on the British throne as King Wilhelm V. Sounds strange, right? But it's not as crazy as it seems. Wilhelm, the grandson of Queen Victoria, was closely tied to Britain, not just by blood, but by political destiny. Had Britain adopted absolute primogeniture, where the eldest child ascends the throne regardless of gender, instead of the restrictive cognatic system, which only allows daughters to inherit if no sons exist, Wilhelm would have been both the King of Britain and the Kaiser of Germany. Let's break down this mind-boggling yet fascinating historical twist. But before we go further, let us bust a major myth. The Wilhelm you know from school textbooks is likely a distorted version, carefully crafted by World War I British propaganda. This image of the Kaiser as an arrogant warmonger was driven largely by British slanders, including the narrative of his womanizing uncle, Edward VII. Ironically, Edward, the very man who oversaw British concentration camps in South Africa, played a pivotal role in shaping the anti-Wilhelm propaganda. Yet Britain, and especially the BBC, have long promoted the Windsors as the good guys. Now let's get one thing clear. Wilhelm was far from perfect. He had his flaws. But he doesn't deserve to be remembered as the villainous madman that history often paints him as. Take the case of his dismissal of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, the master of realpolitik. Bismarck was an incredible strategist, securing triumph after triumph for Germany. He crushed Denmark in 1864, dominated Austria in 1866, and unified Germany after defeating France in 1870. However, his governance began to falter, particularly when he clashed with socialists and the growing Catholic opposition, and his colonial ambitions lagged behind Britain and France. When Wilhelm ascended the throne in 1888, Bismarck assumed he'd control the Kaiser, manipulating him and curbing his power. But Wilhelm wasn't having it. After a miners' strike in 1889, the two clashed on how to handle social unrest. Wilhelm, with a more progressive outlook, wanted to address workers' issues with compassion, not by using military force, as Bismarck suggested. Eventually, Wilhelm pushed Bismarck out in 1890, and with that, Bismarck's carefully crafted web of alliances unraveled. But even in defeat, Bismarck's brilliance couldn't be denied. Now here's something people don't always recognize about Wilhelm. He was no totalitarian despot. Far from it. He believed in progressive reforms, especially in labor laws, and was genuinely concerned about the welfare of his people. In fact, his push for labor reforms in the 1880s and 1890s was groundbreaking. Germany led the way with accident insurance, restrictions on child labor, and safer working conditions, well before Britain or America caught up. And unlike Britain, Germany already had universal male suffrage, so ordinary German men were actually getting the representation they deserved. Wilhelm's connection to Britain was genuine. Raised with a dual identity, he frequently visited England and always saw himself as a bridge between the two countries. His relationship with his grandmother, Queen Victoria, was especially strong. In fact, she was one of the first to warn him about Bismarck's manipulation and to advise him on his reign. When Victoria passed away in 1901, Wilhelm, devastated, held her for an hour before her death. Unfortunately, after she passed, the possibility of Anglo-German rapprochement evaporated. Her son, Edward VII, had a very different approach to relations with Germany. Still, Wilhelm never gave up on the idea of peace with Britain. In 1913, British peer Charles Harbord wrote, "Kaiser Wilhelm has always been very fond of England and the English. He has worked for peace with England, but in spite of all his earnest endeavors, friction has always existed between the two courts." Wilhelm was continually rebuffed, though, and by 1907, British leadership was already privately preparing for war with Germany. Yet, despite all of this, his reputation before World War I was not that of a warmonger, but a peacemaker. Even figures like Teddy Roosevelt and Andrew Carnegie praised him. The truth is undeniable. Wilhelm wanted peace, but Europe wouldn't let him achieve it. Now let's address another misconception, the supposed naval arms race between Britain and Germany. It's widely believed that Wilhelm single-handedly forced Germany into a naval buildup to challenge Britain's Royal Navy. In reality, Germany never sought to compete with Britain's navy. Wilhelm's goal was much more pragmatic: to build a fleet strong enough to protect Germany's growing overseas empire and the increasingly vital sea routes. Sir Edward Reed, an English naval architect, explained that Germany needed a navy simply to safeguard its global interests. It wasn't about challenging British supremacy, it was about protecting Germany's own commercial ambitions. Wilhelm's strategy was always about securing peace through power, not war. He wanted to build a strong German navy not to threaten Britain, but to ensure that Germany could compete globally. Yet despite his reasonable motives, Britain still saw this as a challenge. In his heart, Wilhelm was always focused on maintaining peace. During the Second Boer War, while the rest of the world condemned Britain, Wilhelm offered his support, even sending men and supplies to help Britain, despite private backlash in Germany. His love for Britain was sincere, yet time and time again, his efforts for peace were sabotaged. By 1907, Britain had already begun laying the groundwork for conflict with Germany. Wilhelm's efforts to maintain peace with Britain were genuine. He even signed a defensive alliance with Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, only for Russian politicians to block it. Despite these setbacks, Wilhelm's reputation as a peacemaker endured in the years leading up to World War I. The truth is clear: Wilhelm was caught between his role as Kaiser and the shifting political landscape of Europe. Again and again, he extended the hand of friendship to Britain, but every time it was rejected. Despite his genuine efforts to avoid conflict, Europe ultimately chose war over peace.